Hola.
Hello, this call is being translated.
Abuela, listen to what my phone can do.
Abuela, escucha lo que mi teléfono puede hacer.
¡Wow! Ahora dime sobre tu novia nueva.
Wow, now tell me about this new girlfriend.
Huh?
Tú sabes lo que dije.
You know what I said.
Language is no longer a barrier thanks to Live Translate with Galaxy AI on Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Learn more at Samsung.com. Samsung account login required. Calls must be made using the native Samsung dialer.
Today on CityCast Madison. It's now been a little over 2 weeks since our neighbors in Mount Horeb lived a nightmare, that of a school shooting. A 14-year-old student with a long gun, later revealed to be a pellet rifle, attempted to forcefully break into Mount Horeb Middle School. He was then shot and killed by Mount Horeb police. Now, in the wake of this tragedy, how is the community doing? And what comes next for the students, parents, and school district? We checked in with the reporter who originally broke the story, Madison 365 executive editor Rob Chappell, who is also, by the way, a dad of a kid at the middle school. It's Monday, May 20th. I'm Bianca Martin, and here's what Madison's talking about. Rob, hello.
Hi, Bianca. How are you doing?
I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. You have been covering some heavy stuff. So
yeah,
my goodness gracious. I want to start off by asking, how are you doing?
I'm all right. It's been 2 weeks now since this all happened, and things have kind of settled back down to normal in many ways. Every once in a while, you'll have a memory of like, wow, that really happened. But it's the kids and I are doing pretty well right now.
Okay, well, can you just take us there for a moment, just about what
Sure.
happened and your experience of that day?
Thankfully, my job allows me to work at home like half the time, and I was working from home that day. And I got the text from my son, who's in 8th grade, at about 11:10 or so, that there was a gun at school. And I just responded, "What?" I'm thinking, is there like somebody found a gun in a backpack or whatever? And he responded to me, "Shooting." And I immediately started, to get up, and then my son is texting me, "Don't come. I got out. I'm okay. Stay home." So he's worried about me at that moment. Of course, I didn't listen to that. I flew out the door, came back to get my old press badge so that the police would let me linger. And then I ran down to the school. It's about 3 blocks from my house. Kind of went up from the backside of the school. While I was running down there, I noticed just many, I don't know how many exactly, but abandoned sets of rollerblades. And it kind of occurred to me, I wonder if this is related somehow. And I did see a few kids kind of leaving the school and from the back and going out toward the Military Ridge bike trail, which is right behind the school. And then I got up to Garfield Street, which is the street in front of the middle school, between the middle school and the high school. And I could see 2 police cars there at that point, and an ambulance. I could see EMTs in front of the school, like on the street in front of the school, doing clearly CPR on somebody. At that point, we didn't know who that was. We know now that was the young man with the gun. So at that moment, I knew my son was out. I should say, in the interim here, I did talk to my son on the phone. I knew that he was safe. I knew that he was on his way to whatever the reunification point was going to be. My wife was on the way home from Madison to be with us, and I talked with her, and she said, just do your job. Like, Patrick is fine. Patrick's my son. He's all right. Do your job. Do what you got to do. And doing my job is kind of what kept me sane for the next couple of hours. So I kind of thought about it. I'm like, what's the best way to keep people informed about what's happening right now? And I decided just Instagram Live was probably the easiest. So I went on Instagram Live and just kind of described the situation. At that point, we didn't know anything, really. It was about an hour later we learned that the threat was neutralized almost immediately. But even at that point, even if the threat was neutralized at that point, I don't know what had happened up to that point. I don't know how many bodies are in the school. I don't know how many grievous injuries are in the school. I will say I don't know anything about police tactics or whatever, but it seemed to me that the police were not moving with a lot of urgency at that moment. A whole bunch of other law enforcement came quickly, but it didn't seem like there was like an active like shooter combat situation. So I kind of had a sense that maybe it was over. But again, if it's over, I don't know what's over. I don't know how many people have been shot at this moment.
Right.
So the other parents started to kind of gather, and people are asking me what if I know what's going on. They start talking about reunification point, which was the bus garage at the other end of town. I did make my way over to the reunification point. I stopped at home to stock up on some stuff. I got some phone chargers and bottle of water and stuff, and went over there. I saw my son. I talked with him a little bit. He told me what he had seen. He never saw the gun, although a friend of his did. His friend was sitting right at the window when the kids started to bang on the window trying to break the window with the butt of the gun. And my son bolted out the back of the school and then heard the gunshots. What he heard was the police shooting the kid. He thinks he heard about a dozen shots.
Okay.
And then so I went back to the school. I started to meet up with some press folks. They sent us away. Basically, they said, your press staging area is over there at Front Street and First Street. So they basically just wanted us out of the way. And so I went over there, and that's when I sat down. And once I was no longer working, that's when I broke down. And because this is probably 2 hours in, I still didn't know. We still didn't know anything about how many fatalities or casualties there would be. And it's impossible to go back and convince myself at that time that everything's going to be fine. The trauma at that moment for my son, especially, and for myself is real. I will also say the intermediate center, which is the 3rd through 5th grade school next door to the middle school, they haven't told us why exactly yet, but the building leadership there had some information that led them to need to evacuate that school. So they took all the kids down the block and around the corner to the public library. They held those kids there for 7 hours.
Wow.
My daughter was there. My daughter heard the shots also, and for 7 hours did not know whether her brother was okay or not. We found out later that they basically interrogated any kid who had heard or seen anything. They interrogated them all, even though they already knew that the threat was neutralized. There still could be additional information that you need. So they did take that long to do those interrogations, and then finally we started to collect our kids about 6:30, 7 o'clock that evening.
Wow. Well, you are the reason many of us knew what was happening because you were on the ground. You said you were 3 blocks away and you went to the scene. And, I think for context, many people in Madison send their kids to Mount Horeb. People here in Madison, we got alerts about what was happening. And, Mount Horeb is a part of the Madison community. And right. Yeah, would you say that?
I would say that, yeah. I mean, we moved here. The other layer of this for me is this is my hometown. Not only are my kids involved, but this is where I grew up. I didn't go to this middle school because they built this middle school after I graduated, but I know everybody. I know the family of that kid. And I know that we moved here in the early 80s because my folks worked in Madison. Like it was already becoming kind of a suburb at that point. So it still is, but it's also its own little insular community, where you got the Trolls and the Norwegian stuff, and but it's hidden me at that level too, that this is my hometown and this is where I'm from, to the point that like when the firefighters were arriving, the EMTs were arriving, one of them jumped out of the car or jumped out of the truck and looked at me and said, "Hey, Robbie, you got to move back." So like it's people I knew were like in the midst of this. So
wow,
that's been an extra layer for me for sure.
How is the community doing?
Doing okay, I think. I think a lot of us have, now that we kind of have the benefit of hindsight, we all know, most of us know the family of the kid, and we're tremendously sympathetic and just aching for them, because there's a few families here who've been here for many, many generations, and his is one of those families. So like we know
Mm.
his grandparents. Like his uncle was on my wrestling team in high school, like 30 years ago. So and is still here and is a firefighter. Um, so we're heartbroken for them. And without any further casualties, like we're able to kind of grapple with the trauma of the fear that which is a trauma, right? The fear of that day was traumatic, but we're able to deal with that and kind of take steps. The school has been pretty great about offering counseling services. I've got my two kids talking to culturally competent therapists, and just to kind of talk through it, make sure that we're doing all right. But I roll my eyes at just a tiny bit, and everybody's very well intentioned. It's immediately there were these lawn signs springing up with like the Viking logo with a little heart around it, and now so it's like, okay, yeah, hashtag Mount Horeb strong, then that's nice, but it doesn't do it a lot. You know what I mean? And now they're selling Mount Horeb Love T-shirts for $10, and the proceeds benefit the school. I'm not sure exactly in what way they benefit the school, but I guess everybody's doing all right, but not sure what to do.
Sure. Which makes sense. And I feel like
Yeah,
maybe I'm hearing this from you about the signs that this idea of like, let's move forward, let's be strong, something that is maybe too soon.
a little bit, but also like there's also a sense that 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 everybody has and this is probably really like not appropriate and a little bit petty on my part, but like uh people get really really sad and upset and want to wear and want to participate in the trauma, and I'm like, I was there, you know what I mean? Like my son was there. My son's an eighth grader, and the eighth graders are the ones who were hit hard. So let's let them have their work through it
Experience.
themselves. Yeah, and a lot of folks want to talk to them about it, and we've basically kind of set a rule that, like, they can talk about it all they want. We're not going to ask them about it.
Mm.
And my son, for the first 3 or 4 days, wanted to talk to me about nothing else. Like, he just kept telling me the story again and again. Would always like add a little detail here. And that was how he processed it, was just repeating what happened, and kind of
Mhm.
reliving it. And he's much better now. I think in terms of the community, though, like I said, this is a really insular, tight knit, suburb, but we're still very much a small town. And the eighth graders, the friend groups have really solidified. In fact, when we went up to the school, the first time we went back to the school was that Friday. The shooting was on Wednesday. On Friday, they let us go back into the school to gather things so that school could start Monday. I was worried about it a little bit, but we went in there, and my son saw his friends and sent me home. He's like, "Here, take my stuff, go home. I'm going to hang out with my friends." And he hung out with them the rest of the day. And then he hung out with that same group of friends Saturday and into Saturday night. So they just really bonded in a way they haven't before. And I don't think it's necessarily trauma bonding, but they're just like appreciating each other and just being together, and kind of, this is going to be kind of a growing up moment for them, I think.
Yeah. And something stood out for me when you're talking about your experience, how unique of an experience to have to put on your reporter's hat and be a
Yeah.
father in this situation. But you also kind of described it as a little bit of a blessing, that it was what kept you sane in that
Uh-huh.
moment.
Hmm.
Um, you know, how have you been coping with this?
Um, I don't want to dig too deep into it, but it came to like that day that the kid had a blog, basically, and there were lots of typical teenager stuff, but lots of warning signs in that blog also. And it was and I decided I was gonna continue to do my job, and I spent a lot of time the day after, like that Thursday and Friday, reading that blog. It was about 70 pages altogether, and it was kind of some dark and difficult things to think about a 14-year-old thinking these things. Um, and I was gonna do some reporting, and I just decided that I couldn't do it after a while, after reading it, and knowing that the families he's talking about are families I know. He is literally the same age as my son. He was Latino. My son is Latino. Like I was too close to it, and I couldn't do it. And then on that Saturday, we learned that it was a pellet gun, and that this was it, which added just another hole just a heaviness to it, and a sadness to it. And I decided I just couldn't report it anymore. The Journal Sentinel, I will say, the other day did a really nice job kind of wrapping as the explainer, the whole wrap up of the whole incident and the blog and some psychology involved in things. So, I would commend people to look at that. Um, but yeah, for myself, I'm doing fine. I'm moving, I'm doing my job, all my other stuff. uh, but I think the responsible thing and kind of tapping out after that one day, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, that pellet gun component to the story just was
uh,
another heartbreak. Everything was so heartbreaking about it. And then that
yeah,
came in and it was almost like I can't imagine not being able to say I need to pause here.
yeah.
This is too much.
Hola.
Hello, this call is being translated.
Abuela, listen to what my phone can do.
Abuela, escucha lo que mi teléfono puede hacer.
¡Wow! Ahora dime sobre tu novia nueva.
Wow, now tell me about this new girlfriend.
Huh?
Tú sabes lo que dije.
You know what I said.
Language is no longer a barrier thanks to Live Translate with Galaxy AI on Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. Learn more at Samsung.com. Samsung account login required. Calls must be made using the native Samsung dialer.
One size fits all seemed like a good idea for clothes.
Nice dress. It's a t-shirt.
Until you tried it on. Same goes for your healthcare. That's why United Healthcare offers a variety of flexible, budget-friendly coverage for medical, vision, dental, and more. So whether you're between jobs, coming off a parent's plan, or even missed open enrollment, you can find the plan that fits you best. Find out more about United Healthcare coverage at uh1.com. That's uh1.com.
I heard in the interview that you did with Ali Muldrow on WRT, and you talked about, some that feeling community might have is just like, no one thought it could happen here.
Yeah.
But you also indicated in that conversation, months earlier, you were starting to think, actually, this could happen here.
Yeah. So this is the sad part. I don't remember which of the school shootings it was that prompted me to think that. It might have been the one in Iowa a couple of months ago. And this will sound like it's retroactively not true or something, but it is 100% true that just 3 or 4 months ago, I just kind of settled on the idea that, yeah, it could really happen here. I kind of knew that before. Like I was always like, as parents are becoming more and more vigilant and hyper aware of these things over the past couple of years. But a couple of months ago, it just really solidified with me that it might happen. And, as it gets warmer now, the kids are going to be walking to school more, but I've been dropping them off. And I've consciously made a point to say, I love you, have a great day, because I cannot stomach the idea of losing a child and feeling like I didn't say what I needed to say the last time I saw them, which is a ridiculous thing to have to think about when you're dropping your kid off at school every day. But that's where we are, and that's where I was. That's where I am. And when I got that text from my son, it was just like, here it is. Like it's happening. Like this thing that we'd never want to happen, but we knew could happen. It's happening. Boy, it was a very rough day for that.
It's a nightmare scenario.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it's like, being in the school right now as the kids. You talked about your son and how, the natural trauma process is kind of trying to pick up the pieces. What happened, circular thinking. I'm curious about the processes the school had in the moment, the sort of safety plan. What do you think about that and how it went and, what happened there?
We're typical suburban parents, so we are nitpicking a little bit about the process, but it seems like it was okay because there were, there's a referendum a few years ago where they used that money to actually upgrade the security at the schools. The fact that he wasn't able to break the window is like, dude, like that was a safety measure. And the fact that you can't just walk in the front door anymore, you had to ring the doorbell. I don't know whether you rang the doorbell or not because the The police were only there because somebody outside the school saw him walking toward the school and called 911. That's what summoned the police there. So it wasn't a cop in the school, by the way. There is an SRO that goes between the schools, but don't feel like it was because there was a cop in the school that this went, okay, that wasn't it. But I have so many voicemail messages from the school that day because they were calling us every half hour with updates and with here's the info, here's what we know, here's what you should do, here's where to take your kids. Um, so there wasn't a lot of specific information, but we at least felt that they were attempting to to keep us informed. The biggest complaint, I guess, is how long it took to get reunited. But at the same time, I understand that. Let's err on the side of caution, I guess, is the thing. So it seemed to me that whatever was in place actually did seem to work. You don't know what would have happened if there's a lot of would haves because if he actually had a real gun or if he had actually managed to get into the building or whatever. But it seemed like things went okay. And also, you mentioned about being back at school. I will say that the day after the shooting, there was supposed to be a middle school orchestra concert, and they postponed that to the following Tuesday. So we went to that, and it was actually really, really great. All the parents were there. The middle school orchestra concerts are always terrible, but they're always great.
Yeah, I have a video of me using a clarinet and like missing the beat. Everyone started and going,
Yep. And my son plays viola. He even said before the concert, if everybody was nervous, he said, guys, we're the 8th graders. They have to clap for us now. But it was nice that it wasn't, there was nothing maudlin about it. There was a mention like at the top. He just said, what we need to be we need to be together right now. So let's be together and enjoy some music. And it wasn't a big deal really, but it was just really, really nice to be with all the same parents that we've been seeing since the kids were 2 or 3 years old. And just be together and that was kind of the first step where we were able to kind of, okay, we're moving on now.
Yeah, moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that this is the moment everyone is moving forward. It's still very much so in the community, and it's on so many people's minds. With a little bit of distance, a couple weeks, what really stands out to you, like thinking about this event and what's still there for you?
I mean, what's still there for me is still definitely the fear of that day. I mean, my kids still get startled by loud noises in ways they didn't before. So that's just kind of lingering. It is really a physical reaction when I think about what I felt at that moment. I will also say the weight of what that kid was going through and what his thought process was, and how people could have maybe intervened had we been more aware. Apparently, some of his classmates may have known about that blog, but I don't think any adults really did. But there were definitely things that we would have warranted intervention of some sort. But so that weighs on me a little bit, knowing that I have a 14-year-old, and I know that there's a lot of kids who go through that and who unfortunately lose their lives to suicide and things like that in that sort of crucial developmental stage. Just the weight of knowing that kid was going through that, and this is the method he chose. It's really rough to think about.
And you said that the school is taking charted steps to address mental health needs at the school. What you'd say?
Yeah, they did have a sort of an assembly, a gathering on that Friday, and then they've really made mental health, counseling, therapy, whatever available. The first day they're back at school, that Monday, they had 45 therapy dogs in the schools, which was kind of fantastic.
Oh,
but the mental health piece is helping these surviving kids deal with that traumatic event. What I'm not sure about is, are we going to learn from this? And to be fair, they may be doing this and I'm just not aware of it. But the big question is, are we learning from this? Are we going to look for the next one? Are we going to watch? What did we learn from this that we can use to increase our mental health capacity to avoid the next one, to catch the next kid who's in that crisis, in that mental health state before something tragic happens?
Yeah. have you seen those discussions in the community happening about how to prevent something like this from happening in the future?
No, not really. I mean, in terms of prevention, like what was prevented was a breach of the school, right? Because even with the pellet gun, you could do some damage and it could cause a lot more fear and trauma. Certainly, even if you couldn't actually, you know, potentially kill someone with that gun, it would have been worse had he gotten into school. So in terms of prevention, it was like sort of the physical security prevention. I haven't heard a lot of talk about mental health prevention, although I'm sure those conversations are happening outside of my circle. I'm not really plugged into the school board. I do know that my daughter's been struggling a little bit, and her teacher and the counselors there at the school have been tremendously responsive to her and proactively reaching out to us and saying like, hey, she had a rough day today, which has been great to see. It, in terms of actual literal, what can we learn for prevention and mental health intervention in the future? I haven't been privy to those conversations if they're happening.
Yeah. Well, Rob, we so very deeply appreciate you coming and sharing your story and what's happening. I know this is extremely difficult, and hopefully these conversations will continue.
I really appreciate you giving me the space to discuss this. As a reporter, I'm like, I'm not sure what the news hook is anymore. I'm not, is this newsworthy? Because it's been 2 weeks already. But at the same time, it's only been 2 weeks. One of the things that happens in these instances is that we all cry about it. We all say thoughts and prayers, and then we move on. And then there's another one 2 months later. So I think continuing to talk about these is actually very important. So I really appreciate you giving me the chance.
Yes, absolutely. That was Rob Chappell, executive editor of Madison 365. If you want to find his reporting of this story or the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel article he mentioned, head to our show notes for a link. And if you or someone you know is dealing with a mental health crisis that includes suicidal thoughts, you can always call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 988. You can also text HOPELINE, that's one word, HOPELINE, to the National Crisis Text Line at 741-741. You're not alone. That's all for today here on CityCast Madison. I'm Bianca Martin. If you enjoyed the show, why not share this episode with your neighbor? Because, hey, we're all in this together. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more stories from around the city. Until next time, go hug your loved ones.